The walk back to the Drifting Sparrow felt different than any walk Una had taken before. She was still aware of the stairs, still conscious of the whispers that followed her through the station corridors. But something fundamental had changed. She was no longer just a monster being tolerated in the shadows. She was a person who had stood before a crowd of people who hated her and had been judged on her own. Merit was not acceptance. She knew that, but it was acknowledgement, and after 23 years of being treated as less than nothing, acknowledgement felt like a miracle. Marcus walked beside her in comfortable silence, his presence a steady anchor that she had come to rely on more than she wanted to admit. When they reached the ship, he keyed open the airlock and gestured for her to enter first. The interior of the Drifting Sparrow had never looked so welcoming. "So," Marcus said as the airlock sealed behind them. "I have been thinking." "About what?" Una asked, settling into one of the galley chairs while Marcus rummaged through his storage compartments. "About this sponsorship thing," he replied. "It is supposed to make you my responsibility, which is ridiculous because you are more capable than half the beings I've met in my travels." He emerged from the compartment holding a small box. "But it got me thinking about what I actually want. Not what the station authorities want, not what makes sense on paper, but what I want." He set the box on the table in front of her. "I want a partner," he said simply. "I have been flying alone for 12 years, and I did not realize how tired of it I was until you started fixing my engines and eating meals with me, and making this ship feel like something other than a floating metal coffin." Una stared at the box, not understanding. "Open it," Marcus said. She reached out with trembling hands and lifted the lid. Inside was a toolkit, compact and well-organized, with high-quality instruments designed for precision work. Her name was etched into the case in clean, careful letters: YA Chief Engineer, Drifting Sparrow. "I had it made while you were in detention," Marcus said. "Probably should have waited to see how the hearing went, but I guess I was feeling optimistic." Una could not speak. She lifted the toolkit out of the box and held it like it was the most precious thing in the universe, because in that moment, to her, it was. "This is not charity," Marcus continued, "and it is not pity. You are genuinely the best engineer I have ever worked with. Your forearms can do things that would take me forever, and you actually seem to enjoy the work, which is more than I can say for myself most days." He sat down across from her. "I am offering you a job. A real one, with fair wages and a permanent bunk, and a say in where we go and what cargo we haul. We would be partners, 50-50 split on profits after expenses." "Why?" Una asked, the question that kept coming back no matter how many times he answered it. Marcus smiled. "Because you asked me once if you were a monster, and I have been thinking about that question ever since." He leaned forward. "You know what monsters are, Una?" "Really?" She shook her head. "Monsters are beings who do not care about the harm they cause," Marcus said. "They hurt without remorse, destroy without guilt, consume without ever wondering if they should. Real monsters never ask if they are terrible. They do not have the capacity for that kind of self-reflection." He reached across the table and took one of her hands in his. "You have spent your entire life asking that question, worrying about it, trying so hard to be good that you forgot you already were. That is not what monsters do." Una felt something break inside her, a wall she had built so long ago that she had forgotten it was there. "I do not know how to do this," she whispered. "I do not know how to have a home or a job or a friend. I have been surviving for so long that I do not know how to live." "Then we will figure it out together," Marcus said. "I am not exactly an expert at life either, but I think that is okay. I think the figuring out is supposed to be the point." He squeezed her hand. "So, what do you say, partner?" Una looked at the toolkit with her name on it, at the ship that had become more of a home than anywhere she had lived before, at the human who had seen her as a person when no one else would. "Yes," she said. and the word felt like stepping into sunlight after years in the dark. "Yes, I would like that," Marcus grinned. "Good, because the navigation console is acting up again, and I have no idea what is wrong with it." Yuna laughed. Actually laughed, and the sound surprised both of them. "I will look at it," she said. "But first, can I ask you something?" "Anything. Why did you help me that first night?" she asked. "When you found me in the cargo bay, why did you offer me food instead of calling security or just walking away?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Because someone should have helped me when I was alone," he said finally. "After the pirates killed my family, after I spent 6 days drifting in that cargo hold, thinking I was going to die, nobody helped me. Rescue came, sure, but nobody saw me. Nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody offered me a meal and a place to sleep." He looked at her with eyes that held old pain and new hope in equal measure. "I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to be for someone else what nobody was for me, I would take it. And then I found a scared kid crying in a cargo bay. And the choice was easy. Yuna did not know what to say to that. So she said the only thing that felt true. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for letting me," Marcus replied. They sat together in comfortable silence for a long moment. And then Marcus slapped his hands on the table. "All right? Enough emotional stuff. We have a ship to run and cargo to haul. I got a lead on a contract to the Varus system that pays well and does not require us to deal with too many bureaucrats." He stood and headed toward the cockpit. "Get that navigation console working and we can leave by tomorrow morning." "Yes, Captain," Yuna said with a small smile. Marcus paused at the doorway and turned back. "Partner," he corrected. "Not captain, partner. Get it right, chief engineer." He disappeared into the cockpit, and Yuna heard him humming an old Earth song. As he started the pre-flight checklist, she picked up her toolkit, a toolkit with her name on it, and headed toward the engine room. The work was familiar, comforting in its complexity, and she lost herself in the dance of circuits and relays that made the ship function as she worked. She caught her reflection in a polished panel and paused for so long. She had looked at herself and seen only what others saw, a monster, a threat, a reminder of horrors she had never committed. But now, for the first time, she saw something different. She saw an engineer with a job to do. Saw a partner with a ship to fly. She saw a person with a home. The drifting Sparrow undocked from Nexus Prime an hour later, its engines humming with renewed efficiency. Thanks to Yuna's repairs, she stood at the observation window in the small common area, watching the station shrink in the distance, its lights fading into the vast darkness of space. The galaxy was still full of people who would hate her on sight. There would be other stations that would refuse her entry, other crowds that would call her a monster, other moments of fear and rejection and pain. But there would also be Fissa ship that was her home, a human who was her friend, a future that was finally, impossibly, hers. Marcus appeared beside her, 2 cups of that terrible bitter coffee in his hands. She accepted one, even though she found the taste revolting, because drinking it together had become their ritual. "Ready for the next adventure?" he asked. Yuna looked out at the stars, countless points of light scattered across infinite darkness, each one a destination, a possibility, a chance. "Yes," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "They call me a monster," she thought, watching her reflection fade as the stars grew brighter. "Maybe they always will, but I know what I am now, and that is enough." The drifting Sparrow sailed on into the void, carrying 2 broken souls who had found in each other something neither had dared to hope for: a place to belong, a reason to keep going, a home among the stars and in the quiet hum of the engines. In the warmth of the galley, in the simple miracle of being seen, Yuna finally had her answer. She was not a monster. She never was. The central assembly hall of Nexus Prime had been designed to hold important ceremonies and diplomatic functions. But today it had been converted into something that felt more like an arena, rows of seats filled with spectators surrounded a central platform where Yuna sat alone at a small table. Her wings pressed so tight against her back that they ached. Her four hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. The crowd was enormous, far larger than she had expected, and the weight of their stares pressed down on her like a physical force. Most had come to see the monster condemned. She could read it in their eyes, in the way they whispered to each other and pointed at her, in the signs some of them carried demanding her expulsion. Commander Vosk presided over the hearing from an elevated platform, flanked by two other arbitrators selected from neutral species who had no historical grievances with the Vesparith process. Was meant to be fair, but Yuna could feel the deck stacked against her before a single word was spoken. "This hearing will now come to order," Vosk announced, and the hall fell silent. "We are here to address the petition filed by the Nexus Prime Merchants Association calling for the removal of the Vespari known as Yuna from this station. The petitioners will present their case first." A Korvathi, female in expensive robes, rose from the front row and approached the speaking platform. She was well-spoken and composed, and she laid out her case with devastating precision. 17 formal complaints from citizens who felt unsafe documentation of decreased foot traffic in commercial areas near Yuna's work location, testimony from parents whose children had nightmares after seeing her historical records of Vespari, atrocities displayed on large screens for the entire hall to see. With each piece of evidence, Yuna felt herself shrinking smaller, becoming less of a person and more of a symbol. The Korvathi finished by calling witnesses, one after another, all of them describing the fear they felt when they saw Yuna, the memories of stories their grandparents had told them, the instinctive terror that gripped them in her presence. "We do not ask for violence against this creature," the Korvathi concluded. "We simply ask that she be removed from our home so that we may live without fear. Is that so unreasonable?" The crowd murmured in agreement, and Yuna wanted to disappear into the floor. Then it was Marcus's turn. He rose from his seat beside her and walked to the speaking platform with a calm confidence that Yuna envied. He stood there for a moment, looking out at the crowd, and when he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the hall. "I am not going to tell you that your fear is not real," he began. "Fear is always real to the person feeling it, and the history of the Vespari is horrific. I will not pretend otherwise." The crowd seemed surprised by this admission. "But I want to ask you a question," Marcus continued. "When you look at her, what do you actually see?" He turned and pointed at Yuna, and she forced herself to meet his eyes. "You see a monster," he said. "You see mandibles and compound eyes and wings that remind you of the swarms in your history lessons. You see something different and frightening, and you want it gone." He paused and turned back to the crowd. 300 years ago, you would have been right to be afraid. The Vespari of that era were driven by biological imperatives they could not control. They consumed because their bodies demanded it, and they had not yet developed the capacity to override those demands. Marcus took a step forward. "But let me tell you about the monster I know. She wakes up every day and works a job that most of you consider beneath you, processing your waste in the lowest levels of this station. She keeps her wings folded, even though it hurts, because she knows the sight of them frightens people. She speaks softly and moves carefully and does everything she can to be invisible." His voice grew stronger. "She has been beaten and driven out of 11 different stations. She watched her parents murdered by a mob when she was 12 years old. She has survived alone in a galaxy that hates her for something she never did. And through all of that, she has not hurt a single person." He turned to face the arbitrators. "Now let me tell you about another species with a history of violence. My species, humanity." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. 200 years before we achieved faster than light travel, We fought a war that killed over 70 million people, Marcus said. We dropped atomic weapons on cities full of civilians. We built gas chambers to murder millions based on their ethnicity. We enslaved each other for centuries. We destroyed ecosystems and drove countless species to extinction through greed and negligence. You let that sink in, by the standards being applied to her. Every human should be quarantined as a threat to galactic civilization. We have proven over and over again that we are capable of unspeakable cruelty. That is different. Someone in the crowd called out, "How?" Marcus demanded, "Because it was longer ago? Because we have had time to prove we changed." He pointed at Yuna again. She has never been given that chance. You judge her for crimes committed before her parents were born. You punish her for the sins of ancestors she never met. You look at her biology and assume she is a monster because monsters once wore that shape. He walked to Yuna's table and stood beside her. Humanity earned its place in this galaxy by proving we could be better than our worst moments. We showed that our capacity for destruction was matched by our capacity for compassion. That the same hands that build weapons could also build bridges. He put a hand on Yuna's shoulder. All she is asking for is the same chance. Judge her by her actions, not by her ancestors. Judge her by who she is, not by what she looks like. The hall was silent, then a small voice broke through the quiet. "Mommy, can I ask her something?" A young Corvethi girl, no more than 6 years old, was tugging at her mother's arm and pointing at Yuna. Mother looked horrified and tried to pull her daughter back. But the child was persistent. "Let her speak," Vosk said. Surprising everyone, the little girl walked toward the central platform with the fearlessness of youth. Her scaled face full of curiosity rather than hatred. She stopped a few feet from Yuna and looked up at her with wide eyes. "Do you really eat people?" The child asked the question was so innocent and so direct that Yuna almost laughed. She knelt down to the child's level, moving slowly so as not to frighten her, and shook her head. "No," she said softly. "I eat the same nutrition paste that everyone else does. It tastes terrible." The child giggled. "My daddy says nutrition paste tastes like recycled air filters." "Your daddy is very wise," Yuna said. And she found herself smiling despite everything. The child tilted her head, studying Yuna with open curiosity. "You do not look scary up close," she said. "Your wings are pretty, like the pictures of butterflies my teacher showed us." "Thank you," Yuna managed, her voice thick with emotion. The child's mother rushed forward and snatched her daughter away, casting a fearful look at Yuna. But the damage to the crowd's certainty had been done. A monster would not kneel gently to speak with a child. A monster would not joke about nutrition. Paste. A monster would not have tears glistening in her compound eyes from a simple compliment about her wings. The mood in the hall had shifted, not completely, but enough. "The arbitration panel will now deliberate," Vosk announced. "We will return with our decision within the hour." The waiting was Agon. Yuna sat in a small room adjacent to the hall with Marcus beside her. Neither of them speaking, both of them knowing that the next hour would determine everything when they were finally called back. Yuna could barely feel her legs as she walked to her place. Vosk stood at his platform, his yellow eyes unreadable. "This panel has reached a decision," he said. "We find that the petition for removal is not supported by evidence of any actual wrongdoing by the individual known as Yuna. Fear, while understandable, is not sufficient grounds for expulsion under Galactic Accord law." Yuna felt her heart start beating again. However, Vosk continued, and her hope faltered. "We recognize the legitimate concerns of the station's residents. Therefore, we rule that Yuna may remain on Nexus Prime only if she has a registered sponsor who accepts legal responsibility for her conduct." He looked at Marcus. "Do you accept this responsibility, human?" Marcus did not hesitate. "I do." Vosk nodded. "Then his hearing is concluded." Yuna is free to go. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some protesting, others nodding in acceptance. A few even offering small gestures of acknowledgement as Yuna passed. It was not victory. Not really, but it was something, it was a chance. The security officers came for her at dawn. Yuna was in the engine room running diagnostics when the Drifting Sparrow's airlock chimed with an official override code. And before she could react, 4 armed officers in Nexus Prime uniforms stormed aboard. Vespari, designate Yuna, the lead officer announced, his voice flat and official. You are being detained for questioning regarding multiple complaints of threatening behavior towards station residents. What? Yuna stammered, backing against the wall as the officers surrounded her. I have not threatened anyone. I have not done anything. You will have the opportunity to address these allegations at the security center, the officer said. Come with us peacefully or we will use force. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his expression thunderous. What is going on here? He demanded. You cannot just board my ship and arrest my crew without explanation. This is not an arrest. It is a detention for questioning, the officer replied. And we have authority to enter any vessel docked at this station when there is a potential threat to public safety. What threat? Marcus asked, his voice rising. She processes your garbage and fixes my engines. She has not hurt anyone. We have received 17 formal complaints in the past week, the officer said. Citizens reporting feeling unsafe, children having nightmares, businesses losing customers because of her presence in certain areas. Those are not crimes, Marcus said. You cannot detain someone because other people are afraid of them. We can when the fear is justified by historical precedent, the officer countered. The Vespari are a documented threat species, and under Galactic Accord security protocols, station authorities have broad discretion in managing that threat. Yuna felt the familiar weight of despair settling over her. This was how it always ended. Sooner or later, she had been foolish to think this time would be different. I will come with you, she said quietly, her voice defeated. I do not want to cause any more trouble. Yuna, no, Marcus said. But she shook her head. It is okay, she told him. Though they both knew it was not, this is how it works. I am used to it. The officers escorted her off the ship and through the station corridors. And Yuna kept her eyes fixed on the floor as people stopped to stare and whisper. She heard the words they used, monster and bug and thing. And each one was a small wound added to the thousands she already carried. The security center was cold and sterile, and they placed her in a holding cell with transparent walls that let everyone passing by see exactly what she was. Yuna sat on the hard bench and folded her wings tight against her back and waited for whatever would come next. Commander Voss came to see her an hour later. He was Sithran, a reptilian species known for their logical minds and strict adherence to rules. And his yellow eyes studied her with a clinical detachment that was somehow worse than open hatred. I have reviewed the complaints, he said, standing outside her cell with his hands clasped behind his back. They are not specific. There are no allegations of actual harm, just expressions of fear and discomfort. Then why am I here? Yuna asked. Because fear can be just as disruptive as violence, Vosk replied. And because the Merchants Association has filed a formal petition to have you removed from the station. They claim your presence is bad for business. Yuna laughed bitterly. I process their waste in the lowest levels of the station. I stay out of sight as much as possible. I do everything I can to be invisible. And it is still not enough. It never will be, Vosk said. And there was something almost like sympathy in his voice. You are Vespari, and the galaxy has a long memory. He pressed a control on the wall, and a holographic display appeared, showing footage that Yuna had never seen, but somehow always knew existed. Vespari swarms descending on cities. Millions of winged figures blotting out the sky. consuming everything in their path, screaming victims, burning buildings. Entire worlds stripped bare. 300 years ago, your ancestors killed over 2 billion sentient beings across 3 star systems, Vosk said. They did not conquer for resources or territory or ideology. They consumed because that was their nature, because they could not stop themselves. I know what they did, Una whispered, unable to look away from the horror on the screen. I have always known. Then you understand why people fear you, Vosk said. You understand why they see you and think of extinction, of their ancestors torn apart by mandibles, just like yours. I am not them, Una said, her voice cracking. I have never hurt anyone. I was born after the wars. I did not choose what my species did. No. You did not, Vosk agreed. But you carry their legacy, whether you want to or not. That is the burden of history. Marcus arrived at the security center 30 minutes later, demanding to see her and threatening to file complaints with every regulatory body in the sector. Vosk allowed him into the detention area, where he immediately pressed his hands against the transparent wall of Una's cell. Are you okay? He asked. Did they hurt you? No, Una said. They just want me gone, same as always. That is not going to happen, Marcus said firmly. Turning to face Vosk, she has rights under the Galactic Accord. You cannot just expel someone from a station without due process. I am aware of the regulations, Vosk replied, which is why I have not expelled her yet. But I am under significant pressure from the civilian population, and I have to balance her rights against public safety concerns. What public safety concerns? Marcus demanded. She has not done anything. The Vespari do not need to do anything to be dangerous, Vosk said. Their very existence reminds people of what they are capable of. Then let me remind you of what humans are capable of, Marcus said. And something in his tone made Vosk's eyes narrow. We nearly destroyed our own planet before we ever reached the stars, Marcus continued. We had world wars that killed hundreds of millions. We developed weapons that could crack continents. We enslaved and murdered and brutalized each other for thousands of years over differences that seem laughable now. He took a step toward Vosk. By your logic, every human should be locked up as a potential threat. We have proven over and over again that we can be monsters when we choose to be. That is different, Vosk said. But his voice was less certain now. How? Marcus asked. Because it was a long time ago? Because we changed? Because we proved we could be better? He pointed at Una through the cell wall. She has never had the chance to prove anything. You look at her and see her ancestors. But I look at her and see a person who has survived unimaginable cruelty with her kindness intact. Vosk was silent for a long moment. What would you have me do? He asked finally. I cannot ignore 17 formal complaints and a merchant petition. The political pressure alone would make my position untenable. Give her a hearing, Marcus said. A real one, under the formal adjudication protocols of the Galactic Accord. Let her face her accusers and defend herself. Let the evidence speak instead of fear. Vosk considered this. A formal hearing would be public, he said. It could inflame tensions further, or it could give people a chance to see her as she really is, Marcus countered, not as a symbol of historical trauma, but as an individual. Una watched this exchange with a mixture of hope and terror. Public hearing meant facing all of that hatred directly, meant standing before a crowd that saw her as a monster and trying to convince them otherwise. She did not know if she was strong enough for that, but Marcus believed she was, and for reasons she could not fully explain. That belief meant everything. Very well, Vosk said finally. I will schedule a formal hearing for 3 days from now, but I warn you, human, this could go badly for both of you. I understand, Marcus said. We will take that risk. He looked at Una through the cell wall, and she saw something in his eyes that she had not seen from anyone in years. Faith. "We are going to fight this," he told her. "And we are going to win." Yuna wanted to believe him. She wanted it more than she had ever wanted anything. 3 weeks had passed since that first night on the Drifting Sparrow, and Yuna still could not quite believe that any of it was real. Marcus had offered her a place to sleep in the ship's small crew quarters, a room that had sat empty for years since he started hauling cargo alone, and she had accepted with hesitation that slowly melted into gratitude. She still worked her shifts at the waste processing facility because she needed to maintain her station residency permit. But now she had somewhere warm to return to when the work was done. More than that, she had someone to talk to. Marcus was not a complicated man in the ways that mattered most. He woke up early, drank bitter coffee that he swore was essential to human survival, checked his cargo manifests, and spent his days loading and unloading shipments from worlds across the sector. He complained about fuel prices and docking fees and the bureaucracy of the Galactic Accord, but he did so with a humor that made Yuna smile despite herself. He asked her questions and listened to her answers and never once looked at her like she was something to be feared. "You are really good with that," he said one afternoon, watching as Yuna rewired a faulty power coupling in the ship's engine room. Her 4 arms moved in perfect coordination, each hand performing a different task simultaneously, and she completed in minutes what would have taken Marcus an hour. "I had to learn," she said, not looking up from her work. "When you cannot pay for repairs, you learn to do them yourself." "Where did you pick it up?" "Everywhere," Yuna said. "I have lived on 11 different stations since my parents died, and I never stayed long enough to make friends, but I watched and I learned. Mechanics on one station, electronics on another, life support systems on a third." She finished the coupling and tested the connection, satisfied when the power reading stabilized. "I always thought that if I could make myself useful enough, someone might let me stay." Marcus was quiet for a moment, and when Yuna looked up she saw something in his eyes that she could not quite identify. "Did it work?" he asked softly. "No," she admitted. "Being useful does not matter when people are afraid of you. They always find a reason to make you leave eventually." Marcus nodded slowly, and Yuna could tell he understood in a way that went beyond simple sympathy. "I lost my family 12 years ago," he said, the words coming out carefully like he was not used to speaking them. "Pirates hit our colony transport, killed everyone except me because I was in the cargo hold doing inventory when they breached the hull." Yuna set down her tools and gave him her full attention. "I drifted for 6 days before a patrol ship found me," Marcus continued, "and after that I just kept drifting in a different way. Bought this ship with the insurance settlement, started hauling cargo, stopped trying to connect with people because losing them hurt too much." "I am sorry," Yuna said. "Do not be," Marcus replied with a small shrug. "I am telling you because I want you to know that I understand what it is like to be alone, to feel like the universe does not have a place for you anymore. It is a terrible way to live." "Yes," Yuna agreed quietly. "It is." They worked in comfortable silence after that, and Yuna felt something warm settle in her chest that she had not felt in years. It felt dangerously close to hope. The trouble started 3 days later. Yuna was walking through the commercial district during her lunch break, a route she normally avoided but had taken today because Marcus needed a replacement part that was only sold in one shop. She kept her head down and moved quickly, but a group of young Kovati males spotted her anyway. "Look at that," one of them called out, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "They're letting bugs walk around in public now." Yuna tried to walk faster, but they moved to block her path. "Where do you think you are going, monster?" another one asked, his scaled face twisted with contempt. "Do you not know your kind is not welcome here?" "I am just passing through," Yuna said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I do not want any trouble." Then you should not have been born. The first one spat. A crowd was gathering now, and Yuna could see the fear and hatred in their eyes. The same look she had seen on 100 stations before. She wanted to run, but her legs would not move. What is going on here? Marcus pushed through the crowd, his expression calm but his eyes hard. This does not concern you. Human, the lead Korvathi said. We are just reminding this creature where it belongs. She belongs wherever she wants to be, Marcus replied, stepping between Yuna and her harassers. And right now she is with me. So unless you want to make this a bigger problem than it needs to be, I suggest you step aside. The Korvathi bristled. But something in Marcus's stance made him hesitate. Humans had a reputation in the galaxy, not for being the strongest or the fastest, but for being unpredictable and stubborn, and willing to fight far past the point where any sensible species would surrender. You are making a mistake, the Korvathi said finally. Stepping back, associating with that thing will bring you nothing but trouble. I will take my chances. Marcus said. The crowd dispersed slowly, muttering and casting dark looks at both of them. And Marcus put a gentle hand on Yuna's shoulder. Come on, he said. Let us get out of here. They walked back to the drifting sparrow in silence, and Yuna could not stop shaking. I am sorry, she said when they were safely inside the ship. I should not have gone through the commercial district. I know better. Stop, Marcus said firmly. You do not apologize for existing. You do not apologize for walking through a public space. Those people were wrong. Not you, but they are right about one thing, Yuna said, her voice breaking. Being around me will cause problems for you. I have seen it happen before. People who show me kindness get punished for it. Then let them try, Marcus said. And there was steel in his voice that Yuna had not heard before. I spent 12 years running from connection because I was scared of losing people again. But I am done running. You needed help, and I could give it. That is the end of the calculation. Yuna stared at him, her compound eyes reflecting the ship's dim lighting. Why do you care? She asked, the question that had haunted her since the night they met. I am nobody. I am worse than nobody. I am a reminder of the worst thing my species ever did. Marcus sat down across from her and looked at her with an intensity that made her want to look away. You know what I see when I look at you? He asked. I see a kid who has been through more hardship than anyone should have to face, who keeps going even when the whole galaxy tells her she should not exist, who fixes my ship better than any mechanic I've ever hired and does it with a smile. He leaned forward. I see a person. Yuna, not a monster, not a symbol, not a threat. Just a person who deserves to be treated like one. Yuna did not know how to respond to that. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. She wanted to believe him. Wanted it so badly that it hurt. But years of pain and rejection had built walls around her heart that would not come down easily. Thank you, she managed finally. Marcus smiled. You are welcome. Now help me figure out what is wrong with the navigation console. The thing has been acting weird all week, and I cannot make sense of it. Yuna almost laughed at the sudden shift in tone, and she realized it was exactly what Marcus intended. He was giving her space, letting her process without pressure. And she was grateful for it. They spent the rest of the evening working on the console together. And for a few hours, Yuna could almost forget that the galaxy considered her a monster almost. The waste processing chamber smelled like rotting metal and chemical burn. But Yuna had grown used to it over the past 3 months since arriving at Nexus Prime Station. She pushed her cart through the narrow corridor, her iridescent wings folded tight against her back to avoid brushing the walls. Her compound eyes fixed on the floor. Ahead of her, a group of Korvathi merchants walked toward her, their scaled faces twisting with disgust. The moment they spotted her, Yuna pressed herself against the wall to let them pass, making herself as small as possible. Disgusting. One of them muttered loud enough for her to hear. They should never have allowed that thing on this station. She said nothing because she had learned long ago that speaking only made things worse. Kovathi passed without further comment, and Yuna continued pushing her cart toward the recycling center, her forearms working mechanically while her mind drifted to darker places. She was Vespari, and that single fact defined everything about her existence in this galaxy. 300 years ago, her ancestors had been a conquering swarm that swept across 3 star systems and consumed everything in their path. Billions had died in those wars. Entire civilizations had been erased, and the memory of that horror still burned bright in the collective consciousness of every species in the Galactic Accord. The Vespari had been defeated eventually, broken and scattered across the stars, forbidden from gathering in groups larger than 10. Monitored and restricted and hated wherever they went. Yuna had been born 60 years after the last Vespari War, had never seen her homeworld, had never met more than 2 other members of her species at once. She had never harmed anyone in her 23 years of life. None of that mattered to the people who looked at her and saw only a monster. She finished her shift as the station lights dimmed to simulate evening, collected her meager payment from the automated terminal that allowed her employer to avoid speaking to her directly, and made her way toward the lower decks, where she had found a quiet corner to sleep. The station authorities tolerated her presence because someone needed to process the waste that other species considered beneath them, but they had made it clear that she was not welcome in the residential areas or the commercial districts. She lived in the spaces between, in maintenance corridors and abandoned cargo bays. Invisible and alone tonight, she found her usual spot occupied by shipping containers that had not been there before. So she wandered deeper into the cargo section, looking for somewhere else to rest. Her wings ached from being pressed flat all day, and her mandibles clicked softly with exhaustion as she searched for a dark corner where no one would find her. She discovered an empty bay near the outer docking ring, far from the main corridors, and slipped inside. The space was cold and dimly lit, filled with the hum of the station's life support systems, and Yuna found a spot behind a stack of crates where she could finally unfurl her wings and breathe. She sat with her back against the metal wall and wrapped her 4 arms around herself, trying to find warmth that would not come. The loneliness hit her then, as it always did in these quiet moments, a crushing weight that pressed down on her chest and made it hard to breathe. She had not spoken to another person beyond work transactions in over a year. She had not been touched with kindness since her parents died when she was 12, killed by a mob on a station much like this one, who had decided that 2 Vespari were too many. They call me a monster, she whispered into the darkness, her voice barely audible even to herself. Am I that terrible? Tears would not come because Vespari physiology did not allow for them, but her body shook with silent sobs. Nonetheless, she did not hear the footsteps approaching until a voice cut through the silence. Hey, you all right in here? Yuna scrambled to her feet, her wings flaring in panic before she caught herself and pressed them flat again, her compound eyes searching the darkness for the source of the voice. A human stepped into the dim light, a male with weathered features and gray streaking through his dark hair. Wearing the practical jumpsuit of a cargo hauler, he held up his hands, palms open, showing he meant no harm. Easy there, he said, his voice calm and gentle. I heard something when I was checking on my ship and came to investigate, but I am not looking for trouble. Yuna took a step back, her instinct screaming at her to run, but there was nowhere to go. I will leave, she said quickly, her voice thin with fear. I did not know this was your space. I will go right now. Hold on, the human said, frowning slightly. I did not say you had to leave. And this is not my space anyway, just a public cargo bay. He studied her for a moment, And Yuna braced herself for the look of disgust or fear that always came when people truly registered what she was. But the human just tilted his head slightly and asked, "When was the last time you ate?" The question caught her so off guard that she could not answer immediately. She stammered. "I had nutrition paste this morning. That is not food. That is survival," the human said with a slight shake of his head. "Look, my ship is docked right next door and I have got actual food on board. Nothing fancy but better than paste. You want some?" Yuna stared at him, waiting for the trap to reveal itself, waiting for the cruelty hidden behind the kind words. "Why?" she asked. "Why what? Why would you offer me food?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You know what I am." The human shrugged. "I know you are someone who looks hungry and tired and was crying alone in a cargo bay. That is what I know." He turned and gestured for her to follow, then paused when she did not move. "Look, I am not going to force you," he said, "but the offer stands. My name is Marcus, by the way. Marcus Race. My ship is the Drifting Sparrow. Ugly little freighter, but she keeps the cold out." He started walking, and Yuna found herself following before she consciously decided to move something in his voice. In the casual way he spoke to her like she was just another person. Pulled at something deep inside her chest. The Drifting Sparrow was indeed ugly. A battered cargo hauler that looked like it had seen better decades. But the interior was warm and surprisingly clean. Marcus led her to a small galley and gestured for her to sit at a fold-down table while he rummaged through storage compartments. "I have got some rice and vegetables from my last stop at the agricultural station," he said. "Nothing special, but it is real food grown in real soil. Well, hydroponic soil. But you know what I mean." He set a plate in front of her, and Yuna stared at it like it might vanish if she looked away. "Eat," Marcus said, settling into the seat across from her with his own plate. "It is not poisoned, I promise, see?" He took a bite of his own food and chewed deliberately. Watching her with patient eyes, Yuna picked up the eating utensil with trembling hands and took a small bite. The flavor exploded across her senses. Rich and complex in a way that nutrition paste could never be. And she had to stop herself from devouring everything at once. "Good?" Marcus asked with a small smile. "Yes," Yuna whispered. "Thank you. You are welcome," he said simply. And then he did something no one had done in years. He asked her about herself, about her life, about her dreams. And he listened to her answers like they mattered for the first time in longer than she could remember. Yuna felt like something other than a monster. She felt almost like a person.